So President Joe Biden is losing the youth vote. Shocking, I know, but it appears to be true. As reported by Axios this morning, they wrote that the youth vote, I'm talking about ages 18 to 29, has shifted dramatically towards Donald Trump, with President Biden leading by just 2 points in the most recent polling data. Why this is such a big story is if you go back to 2020, you've got CNN's own exit polling data, which showed Biden winning the youth vote by 24 points. And in 2016, Hillary won it by 19 points. So to be sitting at 2%, well, this is fantastically crazy. All around, it seems the Biden campaign appears to be crumbling. The black vote, for example, seems to just be melting away. Recent polling from NBC shows they're down to 71%, which is huge as the black vote historically votes overwhelmingly for the Democratic Party. In 2020, Donald Trump managed to get around 12% of the black vote, which was already a huge jump from 2016, in which he landed just 8%. And the bad news just keeps on coming for President Biden. His approval rating has now hit historic lows. This for any president at this point in their tenure in modern history. As of June 10th, Biden's approval rating hit the all-time low of 37.4%, and Bloomberg and the Morning Consult released their latest polling data showing that Trump is now leading in 7 battleground states: Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The frustration here is palpable from Democrats. Even the convictions of both Trump and now Hunter Biden aren't playing out the way they had hoped for. The right seems to be largely unimpressed with Hunter's case, viewing it as just another prop, a ploy to gain sympathy votes, or perhaps even derail the overwhelming momentum that Donald Trump has gained following his kangaroo show trial in New York City. Now, I can hear you saying, well, how can you possibly say this? Hunter Biden was convicted. And yes, for sure, he was convicted for making a false statement for acquiring a firearm. He was convicted for making a false statement to obtain records and convicted for illegal possession of a firearm. Yes, I understand this. Typically, people in Hunter's predicament, on average, will receive 15 to 21 months in jail. But the minimums can also be as small as just probation, or even a fine instead of prison time. And the White House is also floating the idea of perhaps just commuting his sentence, which I suspect if they do, it'll be after the election. So regardless if Biden loses or wins, his son will be free to go. Aside from this, something else worth pointing out here. The case against Hunter Biden was also largely stripped down. The Department of Justice protected him. They purposefully waited until the statute of limitations expired on the more serious crimes, like tax evasion and other financial crimes. And of course, no one seems to be looking into the allegations of underage women who were nude appearing in photos on Hunter's laptop. Now, when you compare this to the treatment of Donald Trump, where there has been a never-ending attempt to get the man to find anything, no matter how trivial or small, so that they could destroy him politically and criminally, it seems to me that this should not come as a surprise to the Democratic Party that people are not believing that the narrative of equal justice is real. The American people aren't stupid. They have watched this crusade of get Trump, get Trump, get Trump, and Orange Man bad for nearly 8 years. The facade of fairness in the justice system in the U.S. has long since been destroyed, and now no one really trusts it. Which leads me to the story by The Hill that we're going to go over today. This is titled, Trump-Hunter Biden Convictions Lead to Starkly Different Political Narratives. This is by Ella Lee. Now, this woman actually tries to gaslight her readers into thinking that Hunter Biden's conviction means that the narrative of Trump being persecuted can't possibly be true. She wants her readers to not believe their lying eyes and instead focus on the shiny distraction that was the Hunter case. Here's what she writes. She says the overlapping legal woes of former President Trump and Hunter Biden have been juxtaposed as evidence of a two-tier justice system, keen on taking down Republicans and shielding Democrats from criminal prosecution. Trump's 34 felony convictions in Manhattan 2 weeks ago bolstered that GOP-led rhetoric, proof that the scales of justice were tipped against them. But when President Biden's son was convicted by a Delaware jury Tuesday of 3 federal gun crimes, those same provocateurs weren't impressed. Oh, she's really not thrilled about that, is she? Anyway, she writes, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene dubbed Hunter Biden the deep state's sacrificial lamb, while Representative Matt Gaetz called the conviction kind of dumb, to be honest. Senator Chuck Grassley called Trump's legal woes an entirely different situation, and Trump himself claimed that the trial was a, quote, distraction from the Biden's family's real crimes. Trump is, in fact, referring to the millions of dollars that Hunter Biden received from China, in which Joe Biden appeared to have received kickbacks from his son. This includes the House Oversight Committee memo that claimed that a sizable portion of those millions of dollars ended up in accounts associated with Joe Biden's brother and sister-in-law. Now, there have been supposed investigations into the tax affairs of Hunter Biden, but no charges were ever brought. And as I mentioned at the top of this program, the Department of Justice has allowed serious charges against Hunter to expire. So, pardon me for not burying my head in the sand and ignoring the allegation that the charges that Hunter Biden was convicted on were made to be as innocuous as possible, opening the door for a sympathy bounce. Why, the news media would be all over this story, wringing their hands about poor old Joe Biden, his only surviving son struggling with drugs, getting wrapped up in a gun charge while fighting his addiction. Oh, terrible. Surely there must be room for forgiveness, right? I'm sorry, color me unimpressed here. Allowing most of the more serious charges to just expire, oopsie-doopsie, this kind of thing tends to lend itself to the idea that really, perhaps, this is all nothing more than theater. I mean, what better way to try and sell the political and criminal assassination of Trump than to magically align these two trials to occur within weeks of each other? And the Hunter trial, in, out, and done. Not a lot of conversations about it. Not in the way that the Trump Stormy Daniels and all the other drama that occurred during his trial did. So, they could have done this at any time, but they chose to do it now during a political year. So, color me unimpressed. Now back to the Hill article. Ella writes that Republicans' claim of lawfare or the use of legal systems against them have been mounting for nearly a decade as the Justice Department investigated Trump's 2016 campaign ties to Russia during more than half of his presidency. He decried the probe as a witch hunt hundreds of times, and the term is now a mainstay in his messaging. And, as I should mention, turned out to have been a complete hoax fabricated by the Hillary Clinton campaign through her Steele dossier creation, which, unlike Trump, she wasn't prosecuted for, just fined a few $1,000s. Now, she goes on to write that Trump's claims of unfair treatment under the law surged when he came under scrutiny by federal and state officials, which ultimately led to 4 criminal indictments and a slew of civil matters after he left office. He met his first criminal indictment last year, the Manhattan hush money case, in which he was ultimately convicted, with rage describing the charges as an insult to our country. Trump said that the only crime that I have committed is to fearlessly defend our nation from those who seek to destroy it. Hunter Biden's own legal troubles began around the same time as Trump's. Last year, Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed David Weiss, the Trump-appointed U.S. Attorney for the District of Delaware, who had been spearheading the Hunter Biden probe, as a special counsel to continue his work with broader discretion. Weiss was one of the only attorneys appointed by Trump that Biden, when he took office, kept in place due to the investigation into his son. 2 sets of federal charges from Weiss's gun probe and tax probe were filed against Hunter Biden last year, just months apart. After a failed plea deal and the subsequent trial, he was convicted Tuesday in the first of those cases, which accused him of lying about his use of illicit drugs when purchasing a gun in 2018 and unlawfully obtaining it for 11 days. The second case, regarding alleged tax violations, could go to trial in September, right in the heat of the general election. Now here's where it gets good. She writes that Michael Weinstein, a former federal prosecutor, said that if the argument was that there's 2 tiers of justice, then the Biden case, meaning Hunter Biden's case, would never have been gone to trial. The plea deal would have went through. The case would have been swallowed up in some motion practice or some technicality. But because it went to trial, and because ultimately he was found guilty, the argument that there's 2 tiers of justice kind of falls by the wayside. It's like throwing sand in the air at the beach. It just dissolves. Well, no, it doesn't. This is wishful thinking at best. It's a clear and desperate attempt at convincing voters that what they have seen and experienced over the past 8 years didn't happen. Now, anyway, Ella goes on to write that President Biden said he would accept the outcome of the case and continue to respect the judicial process as his son considers an appeal, building off an earlier promise not to pardon his son if convicted. But no, it looks like they might just commute his sentence, so nothing really to talk about here. Ella writes that Trump, however, turned towards retribution. The former president told various media outlets it was, quote, very possible, end quote, the Democrats could face prosecution down the road, that he had every right to go after them given his own prosecution, and that sometimes revenge can be justified. And his allies have made similar remarks. Less than an hour after the verdict, Representative Mike Collins issued a call to arms saying time for red state attorney generals and DAs to get busy. Weinstein said, I think the political rhetoric is undermining the rule of law to some degree, as well as the credibility of the courts, both the trial courts, the appellate courts, and the Supreme Court. And I tie that back to the political campaigns and the politicians who are doing that more than anything else. What kind of crack is this guy smoking here? The rhetoric is undermining the rule of law? What planet has he been living on? I mean, I get that this guy is a political hack. But come on now, rhetoric? How about the federal government constantly trumping up fake news, fake allegations against Donald Trump since the very moment he began running for office? You want me to elaborate? All right. How about the Russian collusion drama, the Steele dossier, the endless Russia, orange man bad, which, oopsie doopsie, all turned out to be fake news, nothing to see here. But it took years before the Mueller report admitted that, well, there's nothing really to see here, just another, oops, mistake. Then there was the Ukraine story. Remember that? The quid pro quo, which turned out to be completely nonsense. They tried to claim that Trump was withholding military aid to President Zelensky in order that he might investigate Joe Biden and his son, Hunter Biden. Even though the financial aid was given anyway, without the demand for the investigation. But oh no, that didn't matter, did it? They still impeached him, even though the Senate acquitted him later. Then there was the Stormy Daniels case, the hush money trial. They tried to get Donald Trump for that, but in the end, no criminal charges were filed against him. But they still use that case to this day. They used it to smear his character by using Stormy Daniels in the New York City kangaroo court trial case, and on it goes. The reality is here that if the Democratic Party had just let Trump ride off into the sunset after 2020, they might have been able to get rid of him once and for all, in a political sense. But by having this ceaseless attack on the former president, all they have done is undermine the justice system and ensure that Trump would have to run again and that they would lock in his voters to vote for him. Not to mention solidifying his claim that he is being persecuted. I mean, come on. Do you not think that the American people could see how ridiculous this whole thing is? How they've waited for an election year to bring these charges? Why didn't this happen years ago? The American people have seen all of this. And anyone with any sort of intelligence who isn't married to their political ideology to the point of losing any semblance of rationality could see that the New York City case was absurd. It was ridiculous. Undermining the rule of law, these radical leftists have done that to themselves. It's taken 8 years to completely destroy the credibility of our justice system, and there was no one to blame for this but themselves. But don't worry, my friends. Our good friend and former federal prosecutor Michael Weinstein is here to tell us that it's not what we think. Ella goes on to write in her article that Michael Weinstein said, despite the two trials' proximity and politically contentious nature, the justice system is so far holding firm. He said, I'm not sure it's a two-sided justice system. It seems like the justice system, as archaic and difficult and as problematic as it may be, is actually working. So nothing to see here, my friends. Don't believe your lying eyes. Get some truth glasses, or maybe just close them. That way you don't have to see what you're seeing. But no matter how much these people try and twist and turn the narrative to their favor, the damage done with the Trump prosecution is reverberating throughout the U.S. and the rest of the world, by the way. We look like a joke. How steep of a price that the radical leftists are going to pay for these actions is really hard to say. But if the election were held today, I wouldn't bet it on Joe Biden. From the To Be Frank show, I am Adrian. Thanks for watching, my friends. I'll see you all in the next video.